So today I just wanted to quickly go over the strategy known as Juice Pirates. It's something I've seen talked about a bit more lately, and I find a lot of people aren't really clear on what Juice Pirates necessarily is nowadays, either because they're unfamiliar with the old builds and the strategy in general, or they just lost to it for the first time and they didn't know it had a name. Um, so the concept of Juice Pirates is pretty simple. It is taking the extreme of the game, which is your goal in every game is not to win every team fight, it's to destroy the enemy core. And that's what this strategy does. So mainly it revolves around Lieutenant Morales and the dropship. So with the medevac dropship, you can basically take off from halfway through the map and drop right on your opponent's structure, right on top of it. And so from level 10 onward, the main goal of the strategy is to draft Morales, Tyrael, and 3 high structure damage heroes and take a fort early. And then at level 10 onward, medevac onto the keep, destroy the keep, and then medevac onto the core uh, every 60 seconds, 70 seconds or so with travel time. And yeah, kill the core. Either you are going to win usually in 2 or 3 tries, or you are going to lose. It is an all-in strategy. If you play card games, it's what is known as a linear strategy, which is to say, once you go and take this composition, you are committing to the fact that your only goal is to destroy enemy structures, and you're either going to win the game doing that or lose the game doing that. And doing anything else in the meantime is just going to reduce your overall chances of winning the game. So specifically with Morales, her job is very simple: keep you alive and be a medevac bot. It's not a very fun character to play in this build. She doesn't do a lot, but yeah, you can't do it without medevac dropship. The other basically required hero is Tyrael, and that's for one primary reason, which is sanctification. As you can see, you drop sank, you protect your whole team for 3 seconds. This means you can clump up in situations that are otherwise essentially suicide and get a lot of value off it before your team dies. And so it also nullifies the effect of core shots essentially, which because you're coming out of medevac, you're going to be grouped up. You're going to tank a couple of those for sure. It also means opposing enemies when they hurt you in the late game. Their heroics, if they have mass AoE, Sank just ignores it. And same thing with CC effects. So Tyrael is basically a must-have. Morales and Tyrael, if either of these characters or heroes are unavailable, you basically can't play the build. You can keep it as an option if you have Morales medevac without Tyrael, but it's so much less effective, it can't be your primary win condition anymore. With both of them combined, though, then yes, that you can go Juice Pirates. The other reason Tyrael's good is, well, righteousness, which, shields are good in general. Also, the trait value is actually relevant because, again, all you're trying to do is maximize damage on structures. You are going to die. You're going to get wiped multiple times with this strategy, and so any extra damage is helpful. The other big thing is on 7, where you get Swift Retribution, and so that means Smite gives a attack speed buff rather, and as you'll see from the other common choices, attack speed buffs are a huge part of this strategy. There are a multitude of heroes you can choose to destroy the structures themselves. I would say the most important one is Artanis, in my opinion, just because auto twin blades auto does a ton of damage, and also because suppression pulse for the keep and core kills are actually important. One, because you can delay enemies from damaging you, especially if they're heavy auto attackers, and because they can counter many of the common Juice Pirate builds with Suppression Pulse, and because it's a global, even if he hasn't hurt ahead of time, he can still stall you significantly with Suppression Pulse. So essentially, you're also taking away one of the biggest like counters to this strategy by taking Artanis. But he's also just one of the best ones, primarily because amateur opponent is so good with Twin Blades. He just does a ton of damage to structures, and that's the most important thing about Artanis and the other heroes you pick in general is how quickly you can rip down structures, because essentially Juice Pirates, once you get medevac, everything's a DPS race. There are a few exceptions, but otherwise all you want to do is kill structures as quickly as possible. Raynor's another very common one, and that's for two reasons. One is Inspire. When you Inspire, getting down the initial fort can be difficult with many of these comps, unless your opponents just completely ignore you when you say 4 or 5 man push in a lane. Inspire obviously pumps up your minions and your mercs. And if you didn't know, mercs do a ton of damage to structures, and even the minion waves, the little archer minions, if you can get them into range and inspire them, they will rip down a structure quite quickly. So that's ideally what you want to have happen. Also, Hyperion. A lot of people forget about the Yamato cannon, and it is a huge DPS upgrade as well. So between just ripping down forts quickly, having like solid DPS from his autos, Hyperion makes Raynor a very good choice for this kind of strategy. The other common ones I see are usually Greymane, just because obviously you build up his autos and you can just go to town on structures with it. But he doesn't really get anything out of his heroics, which is annoying. And the other thing is it's damage over time. Greymane really needs to stack before he does significant damage to structures, which means he's not the burstiest. You have to babysit him a bit. And if you do, he's going to rip down structures quite quickly, but that's not necessarily what you want. Meanwhile, there's Golda, who does a ton of damage quickly because you can stack the corruption on structures, and that does a lot. And also because Rain of Destruction does fairly good damage, and now you can just drop it and still cast spells. So you can pump out a lot of damage in a short amount of time. A good rule of thumb is the more structure damage you can pump out in the first, say, 7 to 10 seconds, the better a hero is for Juice Pirates as far as the DPS roles are concerned. So it's not necessarily about who is best ripping up structures over time. It is who can deal the most before you're likely to get wiped or counter-engaged, especially when heroics are involved, because many of the best heroics against Juice Pirates are the ones that stall out the DPS on structures and not necessarily killing you. There's one or two other ones that commonly see plays. Sylvanas is one, mostly because of her trait. She's not bad at this, and she's better at taking forts than some of the other heroes, but the main issue is, again, just like Greymane, her damage is mostly over time, and so nowadays you can just pick heroes that deal more structure damage quickly, and so it's just not really worthwhile. Again, you can still pick her. You're not going to be punished super hard for doing that. It's just a matter of there are probably better heroes for what you want to be doing. I've also seen Zarya used, but because she has a build-up to get her damage out, even with shields, I wouldn't really recommend her. Although, again, she's very good for pushing the initial fort, and she can get powered up off that. But the problem is, like, her wind-up is so bad. If you do take her, though, the upside is that you get Expulsion Zone, which when you medevac on a core, you can just throw Expulsion Zone in front of the Hall of Storms, which is the spawn point, and generally there's nothing the opponents can really do about it. So that can buy you some significant time. So that's the strategy in general. That's essentially the all-in version. You can also go with a lesser version of where it's just another option you have. Falstad's one of those heroes I see used in that kind of build, mostly because at 10 you get Mighty Gust, and not only is this good for buying you time, but it's also one of the best counters to you, which is if you take a full Juice Pirates comp and they have a Falstad, they can literally just, if the Falstad's in position, gust you off Keeper Core and throw you off. And not only are you going to take more damage walking back up to those structures, but it gives them a chance to intercept you and really make the most of CC and such. Zeratul's another one. It's the same reason. Super weak early game hero, but he gets VP. And Void Prison is huge. Void Prison can be used to save structures, which makes it one of the best counters to Juice Pirates. And it can be used on you when you're getting out of medevac, which leaves you clumped up. And if the team's there, they can nail you with whatever wombo they want. I've been on the giving and receiving end of that. And I can tell you that if it's properly executed, you won't even lose the shields off core. So a good Zeratul player and a competent follow-up will absolutely demolish people. The other thing you can do is if the enemy team is good with Sanctification and you're worried about them popping Sank immediately when VP drops, you can just VP the core and then engage them. And that will outlast Sanctification and give you a time to take a full engage with the enemy team. And that's, again, VP's 5 seconds long. So even if you don't kill them all, odds are you'll kill a few, and they will be fully engaged in you, and you'll probably lose at most 5 or 10% of core health, which is huge. Ideally, you want to keep core damage under 30-40% per medevac. Essentially, the goal number's 3. If you can make them do it 3 times and they haven't killed your core, you're almost certainly going to win. 2 is the ideal number. Usually that is the maximum amount. If you've been pushing really well in the early game and you didn't give up a fort right away, that's usually the key. Especially ones with strong bosses. Maps with strong bosses are good for that kind of counter push where you don't necessarily need to engage with the full team to get a lot of macro value in the meantime. And so Zeratul's very good for that. Also, if you happen to hit the late game, obviously Q build Zeratul just absolutely shreds clumped up enemies. And again, as long as you carefully play around Sanctification, there's very little counterplay to a good Zeratul from Juice Pirates. Again, there are other counters you can have. Mule, obviously, is very good if you can keep your keep alive through the first push. But the flip side is you have an Abathur, and it can be hard to keep up early game if they just 4 or 5 hero push in a lane with an Abathur comp. But if you can, obviously Mulin does a lot of the work, and Clone and Abba really come onto their own after 10. So it can be very helpful. And again, this isn't like a full breakdown, but it's just a good general. So if you're going Juice Pirates, you need Tyrael, you need Morales, and the other 3 heroes are essentially just high DPS structures. So usually like Golda, Artanis, Raynor, Greymane are the common ones you'll see filling those roles. Your counter strategies, obviously if you know it's coming, banning Tyrael or Morales. You can also take people who are good at destroying clumped up enemies and don't care about Sanctification. So Zeratul for VP, Falstad for Gust, etc. Hopefully that better explains the concept of Juice Pirates and what it does. I might go over a replay of our team using Juice Pirates just to give you an example of what to look out for and how to best counter it. Thanks for watching.